Ladies and gentlemen, it is the appointed hour of 6 o'clock. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to call the work session to order. And let me find my cheat sheet. The first piece of business is our organizational meeting and discussion. No one's made any requests to be reassigned or for committees, and I think everyone's doing a great job, and the institutional knowledge is useful. So unless there's, let me know if you have differing opinions, but at this point, everyone will stay on the same committees. And instead of the finance and physical services, I anticipate in 2022 we'll continue to operate as a committee of the whole and for finance and other issues. Also, thank you, Kate, for providing the code of ethics, and I hope everyone will review that and reacquaint themselves with the mode of operation, and we'll sign that and return it to Kate perhaps this evening. Anything city manager or city attorney want to add relative to the code of ethics? Is there ceremoniously anything? We'll fair enough. Conflict of interest disclosure forms. Janie was good enough to send those out. If you haven't completed that and turned it in, please do so. I think there's the fillable, so you can do it online and just email it in and save some paper if at all possible. And then our policy for public comments and behaviors for Lexington City Council meetings. You saw that information, and unless there's any objection, we will continue to operate under those guidelines for our public meetings. Any questions or curiosities or concerns on any of those issues?
Janie did say that on the conflict of interest, a signature is required.
Very good.
Actual signature.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for re-upping, having not been antagonized before, but for continuing to serve as vice mayor. Mr. Ziegler.
And then also just some of our other appointed boards and commissions also have forms to fill out. And so if we serve on boards and commissions, to just tactfully remind everyone, since it's been in our audit a couple of years in a row, about forms not being completed by certain boards.
Certainly, our school board, I think, was showed up in the audit, so we will work with those folks in particular, and certainly there are other IDA and others that need to do the economic interest disclosures. Anything else for the good of the cause? Hearing none, I know Jim had some information that he wanted to review with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we do have a little time between now and our 7 o'clock meeting, what I'd like to do is have Jennifer Bell and Jeff come up and join us up here, please. And we would like to go over some of the tail end of information that we did not get to cover completely in our financial reviews. I guess it's probably 3 meetings ago now, pretty much. So Jennifer's going to hand out the same information you saw at that last meeting. And basically we're going to focus on the very tail end of it, as I said, looking at our potential new financing needs, just to cover that in some more detail, if you will, so you do understand that we are paying attention to it. And then looking at some of the other potential funding needs that we have for new financing and some capital improvement projects of note. So I'm going to let, I guess, Jen, you want to go through the potential new financing needs. Now understand that this is for planning purposes to show that we understand these needs exist, that we've already reviewed debt service payments that are outstanding and when those debt service payments will fall off, so that these new financing needs, hopefully we can plan to dovetail as much as possible after the debt service that will fall off soon. And of course, some of these, if you look at them, the ladder truck, high school, MSA, jail, city hall, jail and high school in particular, we don't have an idea of what those needs are at this time. But wanted to let you know we are very much aware of those needs, and we have to plan a number of years out to make sure that if we have to issue new debt, we understand what that new debt is. If old debt falls off, we understand what that is and how that can be then again. The new debt can then replace that old debt without having to potentially increase taxes along the way. MSA, of course, is not a general fund obligation. It would be through the utility fund. So we'll have to deal with that somewhat differently, or a different set of dollars that we're looking for. We're not looking at those general fund dollars. Jen, do you want to add anything then, reviewing the current debt service payments and then looking at what our newer debts could be down the road, just to give a little more detail on that?
Sure. I'll just take a moment to reiterate the debt that will be falling off to hopefully free up room for these larger borrowings we'll need to do to help cover our portion of whatever the MSA ends up being in the jail. But beginning in FY28, which is the first year not listed on here, we'll be down $713,000 in debt service. So that frees up a nice chunk for us to be able to cover some new debt that we'll be expected to take on. And I guess the numbers seem pretty self-explanatory to me. Of course, I look at them all day, every day. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And I'll just echo what Jim said. The real wild cards are the MSA and the jail. We just don't know what we're going to get hit with on those two areas.
Well, the high schoolers at some point as well. We've got some idea.
Right, we have some thoughts, but
We have some idea of what we're facing in the first initial years, but some years from now, we don't know what that is. You've all seen the numbers that have been spit out from time to time, and I've got to believe, frankly, those will change for any number of reasons. Construction costs for one, and inflation another, that we're now beginning to see. So you add that pressure in after several years, and I'm sure those costs will go up somewhat. Jen, anything else?
nothing else at the moment that I don't think that we touched on in the earlier meeting. But like I said, if anyone wants to review anything, I'm happy to discuss any part of this.
I'd like to throw my 2 cents in. MSA, as we know, I follow MSA. And right now, just for the water treatment itself is, potable water, is projected at 20 million as a low end, I think is a low end. And there hasn't been a projection made yet for the wastewater side of it yet. But there's talk, there's always talk about levels of funding and whatnot. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see another 20 thrown on for the wastewater side, even though it hasn't been officially discussed, just as a placeholder on these budgets right now. So you look at Lexington's share, if you make the assumption that the city and the county are 50-50, just saying, that means ours is going to be 20 million debt service, and hopefully it's over 20 years. And so what typically are these utility debts issued for? 20 years, I'm just guessing it's 20 years in there to use that as a figuring number for our budget.
Is it okay? Can I?
Please.
Okay. Charles, do you happen to know what year they're looking at kind of implementing those projects?
The talk is 2 years.
2 years from now?
From now.
Okay. Thank
It'll
you.
take that long to do the engineering.
It's going to take that long to do the engineering and to decide a contractor for it.
And let me say, remind y'all, this is a work session, so yeah, please, we're here to get educated and educate you all or answer questions from that standpoint, so.
I think when the low-end wastewater, I think they mentioned was like 30 million.
Call me a liar.
And are they likely to do those at the same time, Charles or Jeff? Are they likely to do the water and the wastewater and roughly the
They
same
haven't
timeframe?
prioritized yet. In fact, they're supposed to present a schedule of when they're going to do preliminary engineering reports for the different aspects of the work that needs to be done at both plants. So you'll have at least a year in just reporting or studies, and then they'll proceed. Then you pick what design option you want to do, and then you proceed to a design, which could easily be a year plus. So again, earliest construction, as Mr. Alligood said, it's probably 2 years away.
In terms of prioritizing, the request has been made by the MSA board to the MSA executive director to have a prioritized listing for the January board meeting coming up. That's been, looks like pushed back maybe to the 1st of February, but it's the next meeting, to start discussing the assignment of what the priorities are for what comes first and second and third in terms of where the money's going to be spent, and have an idea as how much money for each priority level would be needed. So things are, as I mentioned in the last council meeting, things are moving ahead, not with a lightning fast pace, but at least they're moving in there. And this represents a large change in MSA information and practice up till now, whatnot, to have these things starting to take positive steps to move ahead and coming up with a priority list is a big change, and I view that as just the beginning of it. And so then we haven't yet had the report on the wastewater side.
Correct.
In there, and so that's still hanging out there with a big question mark.
And I would think any schedule they put together now would be very, very tentative until they get the bulk of the preliminary engineering reports for the different components of each plant. It's kind of semantics, whatever they're going to tell you they're going to do right now. Until you get those in hand, I think that'll assist them in prioritizing what they're going to do.
Right, and I recognize that it's a big job that they have to do, but you got to have a priority list to start moving ahead.
I mean, but getting to Jeff's point, it seems like it's too early to start prioritizing till
Not for the wastewater.
Okay, you do have enough for the water, for the potable, you have enough data.
But it is early for the wastewater.
I'll give a very easy example here. Say our Moores Creek Dam. We had an assessment done by DCR and it came up that we had inadequate spillway. Then DCR mandated that we do a preliminary engineering report on how we're going to rectify it. We did the report. It came up with 3 options. One was to modify the spillway. One was to build a concrete crust wall across the whole 900 linear foot of the crest of the dam. The other one was to actually raise the crest with earth and fill. So we decided to raise the crest, but it wasn't until that report was done that we knew what we were going to do and got the scheduling really going on it. So I think Mr. Alligood's right. You can prioritize, but until you get all those reports done, or when you get the reports done, your priorities might change a whole lot.
But you got to start.
Yes, correct.
These costs are staring us in the face, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. They're coming. And, I have an appreciation that you're on the MSA board, Jeff's engaged. We certainly know this is coming. We're aware. But I was not, obviously in a leadership position when the current plants were created and the MSA formed. And so I look forward to learning about the history of the creation of the MSA and the last time that this was jointly taken on, because what we're talking about is a bigger joint project than we've ever done. Bigger than a courthouse, bigger than a high school, bigger than anything. And the fact that it's coming from the utility fund, I'm interested, that means that they're potentially, depending on how the Rockbridge County Public Service Authority does it, there are thousands of people that are Rockbridge County residents that this doesn't affect them. They have a well. And so I'm just kind of wondering what the mayors and chairs, what you all, if you've talked about this, if there has been any talk, and I brought this up last time, but like if we were to finance, every $7 million or $10 million that you finance, I mean, it's a debt payment of like $400,000. I mean, it's some crazy number, right? And so we're looking at millions of dollars. And at what point we trust the MSA completely and the work that they're doing, but at what point would the city and the county potentially join forces to have an independent reviewer, a consultant, to check their work, to check what we're doing? Because, you know, us chipping in 50 and the county chipping in 50 for $100,000 on a $50 million project to have our best interests in mind, nothing against the authority, but just as a second set of eyes, or that could be very good money well spent. And that person, like I brought up last time, could also be pursuing the grants and making sure we're getting every penny of federal dollars. So I hope that we start thinking that way, because potentially things that we do now, good decisions that we make now, will set us up for, you know, a better standing and when we're facing $50 million of water infrastructure.
Well, without getting into too much detail, because I don't know really all the detail, just know a little bit. And there is discussion among board members at this time questioning whether this should be a patch job or repair job on the MSA, because it's an existing plant, it's an aging plant, as opposed to building a new plant. And comparing the cost of a brand new plant as opposed to aging infrastructure, repairing that. And so that discussion is starting as well. And so I agree with you that an independent third-party outsider review just what ought to happen is probably, because of this level of money, would be money well spent in terms of assuring us and the public that the management is correct, that this is what needs to happen, the proposal for the MSA plan. And there, when you go out there to look at the MSA plan, it's very obvious it's an aging plant to see it. And some of the things where you have spalling concrete and whatnot, supposedly the consultant that's been hired is looking at the aspect of redundancy, building in redundancy in the operation of that plant, which had not existed. That plant is not operated with redundancy as a way of doing business. That plant has operated in crisis mode. Whenever anything happens, you jump through hoops to get it fixed, to keep it in operation. And I'm saying, and every time I go to the board meeting, I'm saying to them, I want to see redundancy. If we're going to fix one thing, we need to have a duplication so that we've got backup that's in line and available right now, and not wait and have to carry a pump to Richmond, for example, to get it fixed. We've got a pump there. One of the things I've learned in attending the MSA meetings is that they had no preventive maintenance program. A plant that operates like that with no preventive maintenance program. They had parts, repair parts, sitting on the shelf, gathering dust, not used, not scheduled. The industrial things that I'm used to seeing in my engineering business is at a manufacturing plant, you always have a preventive maintenance program. You always know what the hours are on the equipment, when it needs to be changed, just like an hour meter on a bulldozer or an excavator. You know, when there's a certain number of hours, you change the oil filter. You do stuff that's preventive maintenance. And the sense that I get at the MSA plant was that there has not been, over this many years, a preventive maintenance program, which has put them in a bind many times in there to do that. And one of the things that I'm pushing for now as an MSA board member is to establish a preventive maintenance program and make that part of the everyday operation.
It's much like if you're looking for shade, you should have planted a tree 20 years ago.
Exactly right.
The second best time is today.
Exactly right.
I'm going to call on the city manager who wants to chime in.
I was just going to say, as Charles, as you mentioned, there are really quite a broad range of options now as to how we deal with the plant. It could be renovations. We could say this on certain areas that are renovated or built new. Spencer, Suter, and I have talked with Jordan several times about, again, identifying priorities for grants specifically. At some point in time in the very near future, you know, there are funds out there now through the ARPA monies, and there are other funds as well for small rural communities such as ours. And we have to know what those priorities are so we can start getting that grant process going, if you will. So there are options. The other thing I would mention, I would defer to Jared if he's got any input, but I believe the articles of incorporation for the MSA say before they can issue debt, we have to approve that, do we not?
I'd have to look, but that sounds right.
Yeah. So they can't just go issuing $50 million worth of debt without the service authority and the city saying, okay, we approve this debt. So it doesn't mean we have to necessarily do an independent study, but we can tamp down that process just through that. An independent study may be helpful, but I would also say if you've got a good engineer, maybe we bring in some other folks. You know, Jeff's got some skills. We could reach out to some of our other localities who have expertise, up to Stanton or Waynesboro perhaps. I know some folks up there, and see if we can get some reviews or some sense of, here's what we had to do the study, here's what the study indicated. Do you think we're moving in the right direction? I wouldn't jump to the conclusion of an independent review and spending tens of thousands of dollars.
It was only an idea, and I love the way that you're thinking. I mean, I just think that that's exactly though what I'm, encouraging, and I know it'll happen, but I just feel like it needs to be said over and over. I mean, it's again, what we do now it could direct what path the MSA takes. Sure, we're the ones that have to, at the end, sign off on any debt. But if they only are looking at one option or one thing for the next 3 years, now is the time to just maybe direct them or just have all the information. So I'm glad, I know it's in our best interest and Spencer's best interest, but it's in all the taxpayers and ratepayers' best interest. Absolutely. I remember talking several years ago with our rate study, our roadmap, there was that, and Debbie know how they felt about certain things, and someone once said, could they build their own water treatment plant? And the numbers that were thrown around, could they? They were a lot less than what we're talking about. I know the scale, I get it, but people have been thinking about this. I mean, and so we just want to draw on expertise that we may not have, I believe.
And two observations. One, I would say, is analogous with transportation. You can have a $20,000 automobile or a $200,000 automobile. It's still transportation in an automobile. And so, to your point, what I'm hearing you say is we need to make sure that we get the right mode of transportation for what our community needs. We don't need the Maserati. If that's what 50 million may buy you the Chevy, not to pick on any brands, but it's important. And I think it's also worth noting, at least in the public, 2 to 3 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Committee got together and identified that a regional water authority would really be a positive thing for our community, and invited the Roanoke Water Authority to come and explain how they came about. Unfortunately, the folks involved in that committee didn't realize we have the Maury Service Authority, which already serves that. So in some instances, we have people that don't even know that we have this independent authority that is producing our water satisfactorily at this point and processing it. So along with the discussion of what the future holds, to your point as well, David, making sure people understand what our structure is and how we're going to go about our business going forward.
Another item that's been put on the table, not been discussed publicly regarding MSA, is to have a backup water supply. Currently, the water supply is Maury River, period. And the discussion in part has begun on the possibilities, taking a look at the possibilities of drilling wells and having a separate backup water supply, so that there would be a backup and maybe blend the two together somehow in there. And so that's being discussed. There's no estimates, no dollar estimates. It's just on the table now, and it's a new item to be discussed.
When it comes to the light of day to discuss, I hope that you will point out to your board members that the city of Lexington is maintaining a backup water supply that's called Morris Creek Dam. And if our friends in the county were to provide the transmission line for that water, it might be functional, but I don't think they have much ambition for doing that. But we're under contractual obligation to maintain that backup water supply for our community.
Well, some of the members from the county on the board are participating in the backup discussion.
Much like some of our community members who thought it would be a great idea for us to have a regional water authority,
Right.
which we already have. So
Right.
Education is key to our success on many levels.
So just saying these things, put them on the table for, put the light of day on them.
Certainly, thank you.
Very detailed topic. I'd also like to now break into some other topics that I think are probably more relevant today, although this is certainly something we have to pay attention to. And I'd like to start out with dealing with our bridges. It's sort of a preview to the CIP. You've heard a report from Jeff several months ago. But as we look at bridge funding, Jeff has indicated before he's looked at some grants, revenue sharing, state of good repair, as to how that could impact what bridges we move forward with and when, if we do receive any funding from the state, and what bridges we have scheduled to replace in our CIP. So Jeff, would you just outline a little bit with that, with maybe input from Jen? And then we want to focus particularly on the West Nelson Street Bridge as we finish this up.
Presently, in the current CIP, we have in the 5-year build-out horizon, the Welsh Park Bridge, Diamond Street, Moses Mill over the mill race, and I know I'm missing one, Ross Road Bridge. I can't think, if you'd like me to give you the program years, I have it here, but those are the ones in the 5-year horizon. And then we applied for revenue sharing for each of those structures, which I informed you, and the West Nelson Street Bridge. West Nelson Street Bridge became eligible for state of good repair funds, I think you're aware of, this year. That application is not moving forward. VDOT countered that they would like us to do a PER, preliminary engineering report, on different repair options instead of just what we plowed ahead with. We came out with the consultant on that. That was going to be about $35,000, and so we withdrew our application. So may be eligible for revenue sharing. Won't know until May, but definitely not state of good repair. In the correspondence I got today, it was highly unlikely, even if we had the PER done, that was going to get funded in the near future under state of good repair, because it seems, if I read the email correctly, that a lot of the local funds for state of good repair are going to be going to some bridge in Covington. I can copy the city manager on that email. So it didn't look like it was promising to begin with. And all of these structures, we have 6 structures. We went ahead and commissioned the design for, everybody's aware. I halted design on the Moses Mill Road Bridge. It was the engineer's opinion that the repairs are not going to be as beneficial as going ahead and doing full superstructure replacement, not a full bridge replacement, but full superstructure. And so I've halted design till I can fund more monies for the additional design of that. The smaller bridges are pretty much 90% complete. Welsh Park and West Nelson are probably about 50 or 60% complete, the plans at this moment. The October strictly construction estimate for West Nelson is a little north of 1.5 million. If you remember the handout I gave for going through the VDOT process, when you're on their site and you start adding in their contingency and then escalating, I think they're using 5.3 or 5.7% each year. I mean, at FY28, that turned into 2.6 million real quick. I would say if we're going to look at funding West Nelson ourselves, I would use maybe 10 to 15% contingency and maybe add another 100,000 for independent and construction inspection. So we'll probably be pushing 1.8, 1.9, somewhere in there.
And Jeff, that's just for repair. That
is for repair.
Not replacement.
The last end dated estimate for replacement was like 8 million, if I'm remembering. So it's a big difference. So it's primarily spar repair, structure-wide, it's abutments, piers, the deck, railing, and epoxy coating the deck, and then of course putting the pavement back. Again, it's unprogrammed. Jim and I were discussing trying to advance that. Right now, as far as criticality, it's rated poor. The sufficiency rating is below 50. But we did load ratings 2 years ago. They are mandated by VDOT, and it's not in any near future jeopardy of being posted down where we'd have to lower the loadings permitted on the structure. Now, when that would happen, since it's a concrete box beam structure, so it weathers, especially with our style of salting maintenance, it does a little better than, say, steel beam structures. But I wouldn't push it beyond the 5-year horizon. I would say some year posting might become between year 5 and year 10. It's just a wild estimate. I think fixing it sooner than later, although 1.8, 1.9 is a big chunk of money, has some value because every year we don't fix it, it just gets worse and worse, and then that number grows, as we've learned with as our estimates keep on going up. And I think it is somewhat, I don't want to overstate it, but somewhat of a safety hazard for pedestrians using the Woods Creek Trail. Periodically, I know the mayor does, city manager does, and I do get comments that chunks of the bridge are falling down onto the trail. One day, I hope it never happens, but you have the potential somebody's that unlucky person and gets a big chunk of concrete that hits them in the head.
The reason I'm bringing this up, when Jeff mentioned the state of good repair, and I think, Jeff, even the revenue sharing money, if we were to receive it, would be in what fiscal year?
Either 27 or 28, and I think for that particular application, it was fiscal year 28.
So we're talking 6 years from now. Frankly, we may not receive that money by waiting. Every year we wait is another delay from FY 27 or 28. We don't want to get into 29 and 30. We've got the ARPA funds available now that were put in the general fund. They could be used for anything. I did not envision 3 months ago using or recommending using it for this bridge, but I really believe that that's one thing we should consider, and I'd like to be bringing that to you and City Council, because I don't believe it's responsible to wait any longer, hoping that somebody else will fund it for us. I mean, that could occur, but equally or more likely would not occur. And so I think that with the money available, that's something I would like to really see us, outside of this work session, bring you a proposal saying, let's go ahead and undergo or undertake that bridge repair right now. Let's get the engineering going. I just don't think we have a good option of waiting. Some of these smaller bridges, if something were to happen, we shut the bridge down and we find a way to get around the community. But with that bridge on that street, we don't want to be in a position where either it becomes a real hazard or we have to put weight limitations such that perhaps we can't bring the ladder truck across it. There's no way then to get the west end of town. The Lime Kiln Bridge Road already has a weight limit on, so Ty can't take his ladder truck down that. Now, so there may be other ways of getting there. I know Frank mentioned maybe getting through W&L somehow, but it's all amounts to time and getting that equipment there in place. And again, not knowing what W&L is for streets, I'm sure those winding roads, if you have somebody parked there or students unloading or other trucks unloading, the fire engine's stuck there. So those are some of the factors that in my mind cause me now to say I really intend to bring that before you. I'm open to conversation, questions, but I just don't believe it's something we can wait on at this time any longer.
Jeff, when you look at those repairs on that particular bridge, how much time would you anticipate that will buy you?
Their estimate was 15, 20 years. Before you had to do more expansive repairs or really look at replacing the structure.
Right. Leslie?
it would be the state of good repair funds that we were looking to get matching dollars for?
We applied for both revenue sharing and state of good repair for the West Nelson Street Bridge.
And if we went ahead and did the project, paid for it on our own, we still have other bridges that would score well or be likely to get those funds?
For state of good repair?
Right, either one, yeah.
West Nelson was the only one eligible this year for state of good repair.
Okay. I'm just wondering, you know, are we really losing out on money if we go ahead and do the repair? We still have plenty to apply for.
Unfortunately, now that they rotate programs, it won't be eligible again for another 2 years before we could even apply for state of good. And I'm assuming since it's already, the score is not going to go up if we don't do anything, so it'll be eligible again. But we would have to do the preliminary engineering report, and if that came up with a whole nother repair regime, then we'll be scrapping all the money we just invested in the current design.
So when you say West Nelson, just want to dot this I, you're talking about the Woods Creek Bridge.
Route 60 over Woods Creek.
Route 60 Woods Creek Bridge.
Yes, sir.
You one time you talked about one thing, other.
Yeah.
But on this list, it says Woods Creek, and that's the West Nelson.
That's
that
correct.
You keep mentioning. All right, just being sure, because the other one's East Nelson, right? The other by the courthouse?
They call that the Varner Lane Bridge, if that's the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Varner Lane.
Yeah, it's Varner Lane. Mhm.
Varner Lane?
It is East Nelson, yeah, yes.
You are correct. I kind of use the naming that come on the bridge reports that Schwartz has been doing forever and ever, so. But you,
I was just trying to figure it out.
You mentioned that 15 to 20 years is what the repair would buy us. I'm just curious, like, buying that 15 to 20 years, at the end of that, we would have to repair it again, or would it be likely at that stage we would have to replace it?
it's a concrete structure, and when they repair it now, it's essentially small repairs. I was telling Jen today. You see all the white markings on the structure since the last inspection. Well, that was in preparation for the plans they're currently working on. So they'll do soundings, and they'll simply, these guys are trained to basically hit the concrete with chains and listen to the sound. And they'll get an estimate to how expansive the repair needs to be and how deep you need to go. It sounds like you're kind of using a witching wand, but it's actually what they do in the industry, to be honest. There are some more advanced techniques if you want to pursue those, but right now they use sounding, and basically they're going to take and cut out recommended repair areas with a saw, chip them down to the reinforcing steel, clean the reinforcing steel, put epoxy coating on it, and redo the cement facing. So you're going to see that structure wide. And that helps prevent, I mean, the main thing that holds concrete structures together is the reinforcing within. The reinforcing goes, then you're pretty much lost your structure. Concrete's good in compression. It is very poor, has very poor tensile strength, marginal shear. So that is the main game, is to try to seal up the reinforcing, replace any damaged reinforcing they can see by splicing in new reinforcing if needed. Seal it up, and hopefully that gets us our 15 plus years. But I would say once you start cutting it up like that, you can only go on with so many repairs of that nature. If it was a steel beam structure, I'd say we just easily replace the superstructure, but it's not. It is a concrete T-beam structure, so that's only going to handle so much spall repair itself. So I would say yes, you're probably looking at full replacement somewhere in the 15 to 20 year horizon.
So taking the longer view, would it be better in the long run to spend the money to replace the bridge now as opposed to repairing it now, or do you think it's a better use of the city's funds to just replace it to buy this time?
That's a loaded question. I guess it depends what all the other activities or projects you're looking to fund, what monies you have available. If you told me you're giving me $8 to $10 million right now to replace the bridge, I'd gladly take it and just get it done.
I guess my point is, if at some point we have to come up with that $8 million, is it better to do that now rather than to kick it down the curb 15, 20 years?
I I truly don't know, Dennis. I wish I had a better answer. I guess my gut feel, if you're really putting my back against the wall, is to go ahead and fund the repairs. By the time, go ahead and sometime in the future do the PER for that day when it comes, when it again is eligible for VDOT state of good repair, and actually look at different regimes of replacing the structure, because it's probably going to be functionally obsolete as far as the construction, 15 years from now. So at that point, I would do the PER and see what types of new bridges fit VDOT's pleasure, and then get their funds then.
I guess without looking at it, a specific analysis, my thought was, one, we know we're going to be facing again the high school in a handful of years, the same as the jail. Why take on another $8 million project today when we also probably want to do City Hall that's going to cost us several millions of dollars we have to finance? In a 4 to 5 years time frame, I don't, again, I haven't looked at this analysis yet, but Jen and I are working on it. How much debt service do we want to add? How many increases in taxes do we want to face in that 4 or 5 year period? So that's going to be the further analysis that Jen and I will do to bring to you so that you can get some idea of the scale of borrowing. If we borrow $10 million for well, that's MSA. But if we borrow $10 million for the jail, what's the increase in taxes we need to handle that debt service? $8 million for, if you'd like to work that up, we can work that up. $8 million for the bridge, how much would it be? $4 million for City Hall, how much would that be? I can tell you, and I'm sure David's running the number in his head. You can almost look at the debt service and say, here's how much tax it's going to take increase for every, $5 million worth of debt. You can figure that out. How much do you want to do? And again, it's not over 10 years, it's over probably 5 years. The DSS building.
I guess one other way to look at it would be, what is the functional life of a new bridge? Like, if we were to replace it, how long would such a bridge last? Like 20 years, 50 years, 100 years?
80 years.
80 years, okay. Well,
it really depends on the type, too.
I guess you could calculate if 1.5 million gets us 20 years, then that's still a good deal, so.
Part of it, we need to back up and look at that area of town. Do we plan to expand? Is a bigger bridge appropriate? Lots of ancillary questions if you're going to replace it. If you just completely replace what you have, Jeff, if the bridge failed tonight, what would be our means? Does the state offer any support, or not suggesting they would blow it up or anything?
Do I have to go out there with a sledgehammer?
I don't know the answer. I don't know of any funding mechanism where it acts that quickly. I'm sure their VDEMs or something would be able to assist with the emergency and maybe some of the cleanup for the failure, but as far as building a new structure, we might be sitting on that ourselves.
Gotcha. A couple of questions. When you look at the Route 11 bridge, is that the one that goes up to the shop that's going over Route 11?
That's correct. Okay. Route 11 over Route 11.
Okay. And then when we look at the Moses Mill, obviously there are two entities that use that bridge, VMI and the city. Is there any coordination? It's obviously our bridge, but is there any opportunity for collaboration or support from VMI?
We can certainly ask the question. It has not been asked to date.
Okay, because that's become a much more prominent part of the campus or the post.
We are talking about the one, we've already repaired the one over Woods Creek 2 years ago.
Okay.
The one this is over the Mill Race.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yep. Never mind.
Has that one changed with the Jordan's Point master plan? Was there any modifications that if we did something to that bridge, we should match it up with the plan?
I don't remember. Arnie? I don't.
One from memory, there may have been a recommendation, if anything gets changed, to widen for improved pedestrian access. Other than that, I don't believe so.
And one other question I had for you, Jim, is that you mentioned the $4 million in debt for renovation of City Hall. Number one, I hope we can do it substantially less, but we won't know until we know. And number two, when I've asked the question in the past, the finance director and yourself both said this is programmed in. We've got the money for it, so we wouldn't need any debt.
Correct.
Okay, I just, I heard something different tonight. It may make sense with interest rates egregiously low to finance it and hold on to our cash, but
it is programmed in, you're right.
Okay.
Making the assumption you're correct, that maybe we should finance it. Usually when you do a project of that size, you do look at financing.
Sure.
And we may have other needs then too, that it makes sense to take some smaller projects in and do that and finance that, because you can't. You could bundle the smaller projects potentially and do debt, but again, typically we don't do it that way. So that's why I mentioned that debt. You're correct though.
right.
And I don't know if it'll cost that much. This number was here when I came here, $3.4 million.
Correct.
Plus $339,000 for engineering and design, and then another $100,000 for a space needs assessment. You know, so
We have another 5 to 10 minutes for the work session. So any other items that you wanted to highlight?
well, I did want to touch exactly on City Hall because you know since I've been here, there's been a number of folks here on council and otherwise who said, when are we going to address City Hall? And there is a schedule, and I do intend to move that schedule forward and put it in the budget for the upcoming year. It's you get $100,000. We'll take that first step. Potentially, we may be able to do more than that, but I do not intend to delay it because I have heard you, I've heard others. From a staff perspective, we do need to have some improvements there for some efficiencies. The structure is deteriorating. We just don't want to continue to push it down the road. So I do not intend to do that. Just wanted to let you know, again, sort of a preview to what you'll see in the CIP. Don't know if you have any questions or concerns, but it is a priority. So that's really all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Unless council has more questions.
Oh, I'm sure we have a multitude of questions on a variety of things. Jen, one thing, when we started this conversation, I just want to make sure to affirm what I heard you say. Was it 2028 that we have $753,000 of debt service dropping off? Doesn't mean that we need to go out and borrow more money, but that is a reality that is before us as we look to the future. Because if I remember the roadmap on the water program, we were somewhat maxed out by our own parameters on debt last year, probably 19, 20 to 22, if I remember correctly, ballpark. So taking on additional debt, especially in the face of rising interest rates, I'm not sure that that's something that we should have a lot of discussion before we pursue something of that nature. I saw you get ready to hit your button a minute ago. Did you have something?
I was just going to ask Jeff, if we were to make repairs to the bridge at West Nelson, would we have to shut that bridge completely down in order to make the repairs?
I can double check. I think the plan was with phase construction half of the time, so it would be down to at least one lane.
It's not an overly wide bridge, so it'd be tight quarters. But am I correct, Jeff, if you hang a right before the bridge, you go by Woods Creek Apartments of Washington Lee, around the law school, and on out by Tennis Center, et cetera.
Correct. You can do East Denny to West Denny and come back out.
And is that Washington Lee's road, or is that our road?
I believe that's Washington Lee's.
Okay.
We'd have to ask a favor.
Exactly. Very good. We covered a lot of material and a lot of good discussion and a multitude of projects ahead of us. And I look forward to getting transportation as much as appealing as the Maserati is for our water production and processing. I hope that we have more of a Chevy or Ford type expenditure. Anyone else from council have any other questions or topics related to the document in front of you. It's not a speak now or forever hold your peace, but if something's on your mind, yes, sir.
When we talk about our debt, we typically say a percentage and where we max out, and it's our own rule. That's what you were referring to without talking about
Correct.
percentage. What is our current level?
If I could, I'd like to follow up with an email on that, because I remember looking at it in the audit, I just can't recall the numbers offhand.
And then the part two of that same question is, then how much room will we have?
Absolutely.
To max out the percent that we have set for ourselves.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Helpful information. Well, with that, we will stand adjourned and plan to reconvene at 7 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thank you, Jen and Jeff, and have a safe evening.